Channel 5 presents Movies Till Dawn for your late night entertainment. Tonight, The Man Who Never Was.
Welcome to Movies Till Dawn, a new podcast that's a safe space for filmmakers to talk about the fascinating and exasperating and always unusual and never quite the same thing twice process of creating motion pictures. I'm Raymond and I hope you won't regret spending the next 40 or so minutes with us. You know what? I'm going to tell you a quick story because this is a John Avildsen interview. This is part 2. And of course, John won the Oscar for directing Rocky. And it turns out that even if you win an Academy Award for directing one of the most famous movies of all time, there's another point of view about it. Now, it rarely comes from the director. Usually there are haters out there that say, they shouldn't have won that Oscar. That director isn't the best of the year. That's par for the course, right? Well, one of the things about John Avildsen that I found so interesting and so unusual was he was self-deprecating, but not in a falsely modest way. He was a most honest guy. And on one of my early trips to his house, as I said, we would go have dinner and we'd watch a movie of his and we'd chat. There was the Oscar that he won for Rocky, and it was on the shelf. And he said, "You want to see it?" I was like, "Yeah." Well, it turns out the Oscar is a really heavy item, so he dragged it down. I held it. I was like, "That's pretty cool, John." And you know what he said? He said, "Yeah, I didn't win it. The movie won it." And I said, "Why do you say that?" And he said, "That year, Alan Pakula, Sidney Lumet, Robert Altman, Francois Truffaut, and me." He said they all did a better directing job, but the movie won it. And I thought, I'm never going to hear that from another director who won an Oscar ever. And that was him. He was so incredibly honest that he would, as I think I previously said, he would walk off of obvious great projects just because he couldn't do it. He had an honest streak in him that was, that was his religion. And it was one of the things I admired and was also kind of so amused by. I never knew, what I was going to hear from him in that way. So we had this conversation about a year before he died, unexpectedly. And there's a couple of funny things that happened during this conversation. One of them, I kind of confront him about his reputation, and he doesn't own up to it. But John's reputation was kind of brutal. He was a tough dude. And everyone who worked with him would tell you this. On the other hand, personally, he was a lovely, low-key, very charming, and like I say, a very modest guy. So there's a moment of that. There's another moment, though, that is even stranger, and it was made strange by fate. And it'll come up. It has to do with a movie that he was supposed to direct and that somebody else wound up directing. And I'll tell you about that if you listen to the interview. Here's part 2 of my conversation with John Avildsen. One of the things that I think in retrospect, because Rocky's become so iconic and there have been so many Rockies since, it feels to me very much as if it were an independent film at the time, and you come from that world.
Yeah, but it was UA, and it was, we cut the thing at MGM before it became Sony. Boy, did I get a great glimpse of film history, because I was there for the first time in 1971. I had been hired to reshoot a couple of weeks of a Charles Winkler Turkey that the studio said was unreleasable. So they came up with new stuff to shoot. This you could shoot forever and nothing would make this thing. But anyway, certainly didn't turn down the job. So we shot some stuff in New York and then went out to Culver City to cut it. So we had one scene where there's supposed to be the sound of a TV program coming through the walls of this cheap tenement. So the editor said, "Well, should we just hear a Western?" And I said, "Wait a minute. this is MGM. You've got the library. You got all the movies here. Let me see what's in the library. And they had all the movies. So at lunch every day, I would sit there in the mogul seat, and the commissary would send a guy over with my lunch with a white jacket, and I'd sit there watching all these great movies. And if I wasn't doing that, then I would stroll around the back lot where all these great sets were. And nothing had, everybody just sort of walked away. There were cans of film that were on the ground. It was just, and I had this idea. I said, they're going to tear this place down because they're going to put up a housing development. So what if a movie buff sneaked in before they tore it down and started taking pictures of these various streets, like Andy Hardy's street or Esther Williams' swimming pool or the plantation set. I mean, they had this plantation, the long road leading up. You could be blind and get good shots at this place. It was incredible. And so he sneaks in and takes stills, and suddenly 2 minutes of that movie shows up on the screen. And it's not going to cost anything because you own the movies and you own everything. And meanwhile, there's an old editor who works there, and he's very much against the idea of this place being torn down. And meanwhile, the head of the studio has a 12-year-old daughter, and he's has her and her classmates taking a tour of the place before it gets torn down. And the old editor kidnaps the daughter. The ransom being, you can't tear the place down. Now, the editor and the movie buff who's been taking the pictures, they are both sort of thrown into this thing together because the cops knows they're there, and the movie buff starts talking to the editor. No, you can't do this. Remember in this movie, so-and-so said this, and the other guy, yeah, but what did so-and-so said? And we see all these clips illustrating their different points of view. And finally, the guy lets the daughter go, but sets fire to the place, and the whole place burns down. And I said, you're going to tear the place down anyway, so why not burn it down and make it part of the movie? They didn't get it. And a couple of years...
And it's essentially a free... Everything in it would have been free. You would have had
exactly.
the lowest budget movie with the greatest production values.
Exactly. And a few years later, they did That's Entertainment.
Right. Well, I think that was probably when you were there was shortly after James Aubrey was sort of the
He was
famous,
still he was the boss.
And he sold everything off and auctioned off all the...
And one of these movies I saw was Errol Flynn's Robin Hood, Michael Curtiz. A beautiful, flawless color print. It was just so beautiful. So I went into Aubrey's office. I said, I just saw you own Robin Hood. Why not reshoot it? Make a new Robin Hood, and with the cameras now you can get up in the trees. I mean, it's very... And he loved the idea, and he started pressing buttons. John here wants to do Robin Hood. Suddenly there were 4 guys sitting around his table, and then they started talking about, would he wear leather? I said, well, I guess. Well, they started talking leather for a half an hour. Well, anyway, I walked out of there saying, gee, this is easy.
For more than 40 years, the most important discovery of this century has been kept secret. These 2 men know why. MGM presents George C. Scott, Marlon Brando in The Formula. They will meet during the investigation of a bizarre murder, when evidence of the formula mysteriously reappears.
Genesis turns out to be something the Nazis considered very top secret. And whatever it is, it's still in Germany.
In a world starved for energy, no secret is more important than the formula.
The people will accept the 12 system because we can blame it on the Arabs.
Arthur, you're missing the point. We are the Arabs.
You actually made a movie called The Formula with Marlon Brando and George C. Scott. Two of the most terrifying presences, to each on their own, to most directors who had to work with them, deal with them, and you have them both. Did you take that on willingly as a challenge? How did you survive that?
I had just developed a script with Peter Sellers called Fu Manchu.
Another famously easy fellow to get along with. Yeah.
And well, in the beginning, we got along great. He thought I was the new Kubrick. We couldn't have had a nicer time. And I remember talking to Al Ashby, who had done that great movie,
Being There.
I said, can you give me some insight? He said, yes, don't wear purple.
Yeah, he had weird phobias.
Yeah, I had a number of phobias. I got fired because he decided he was going to direct it. But I was pay or play, so suddenly I make all this money and I don't have to get up in the morning.
Right.
I said, wow, how long has this been going on? Then Steve Shagan sent me the manuscript for The Formula. I read this thing and I don't understand it. I said, why would the guy do this? Steve said, I don't know. I said, why would he do that? I don't know. So then it turns out that they're going to make a movie out of it.
It was a novel first.
Right.
Yeah.
So I said, somebody along the line is going to show up and say, we can't make this thing because it makes no sense. Meanwhile, I'll get to be pay or play. Meanwhile, I get paid and I won't have to get up so early.
And they won't make the movie.
Well, I got caught. That guy never showed up and they made the movie. Now, Steve Shagan wanted Gene Hackman for the part. I said, oh, no, we need George Scott. Oh, what a mistake. What a mistake. And we even had lunch with him, and he was shooting back the Boilermakers and damning the faggots and the war protesters, and I still didn't see the light. So now we're going to do it with George Scott. MGM said, you got to come up with somebody besides him because he's not selling that many tickets. So we've got the oil guy who's going to give him a tough time now. And I say, now who's going to give George Scott a tough time? And Brando came to mind. And he lived up here in Mulholland, not far from here. And we're driving up Coldwater with Steve Shagan and Steve's lawyer, who was also Brando's lawyer. And on our way, the lawyer says to Steve, listen, when we get there, can you tell Marlon that it was my idea for him to be in the movie? Steve said, sure. And I said to myself, wow, talk about insecurity. Here he is, he's a big hotshot Hollywood lawyer, and he's still, that just shows you the terror that lurks in the shadows of Hollywood. Mm-hmm. So we get to Brando's house, and there's the big sign outside that says, don't even think about smoking. And we get ushered in, and Marlon couldn't be more gracious, and blah, blah, blah. And there are these lovely Asian ladies walking around asking us what would we like to drink and what have you. So now we get down to business, and they said, I've been thinking, I think this character might live out in the desert, and he might have a big dish antenna and walk around in his bare feet and a straw hat and a muumuu. And I said, well, you could do that. I was thinking this guy is got a 3-button suit and is on the cover of Time magazine. He said, all right, I was just testing you. So he couldn't have been more fun. He was just an absolute delight. In his bedroom, half the bedroom was bongos, and the other half was ham radio stuff, because he loved ham radio because he could talk around the world and nobody knew who he was.
It's interesting, that testing story, because what I've heard about him was that he would sometimes do 2 different versions, 2 different takes, and if he heard a director print the wrong one, he would decide, okay, I'm only giving 50% to this movie, because they're going to pick the wrong stuff anyway.
I always say to the star, are you happy?
Yeah.
Why not be happy?
Yeah.
Doesn't mean we'll use that one, but at least you're going to be, happy for the rest of the day, hopefully.
Yeah. So tell me about Brando and Scott together in The Formula. What was that? What was that set like? What was that day like?
Well, Brando every morning he'd say, "How was George today?" Yeah, and
So he was actually intimidated by Scott.
Well, George's idea of a good time is getting drunk and getting into a fist fight. He was a prize fighter for a while. And then when he was in the Marines, he was detailed to Arlington Cemetery. So every day he buried somebody. So that gets you really in a great state of mind, right? Was he a workout.
Did you ever have a fist fight with him?
No.
Or come close?
No, it wouldn't have been much of a contest. But I do remember one day in Switzerland, he showed up first thing in the morning in this little set that we had in a safe deposit room or whatever. He must have had a few drinks before that, and at the end of the scene, he said, "That's it for me. I'm going to the bar." And I said, "Oh, okay. Well, let's see now that you know what you're going to do. I'm going to have to find something to do." So he was just a very unhappy guy.
Yeah.
Very talented, but a real. I wish I'd gone with Gene Hackman.
Were you able to get them to rehearse?
Somewhat, yep. No, not really beforehand.
They didn't want to?
Well, I don't think we could afford it and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. Oh, afford it. That's a great story. Brando got $250,000 in cash each day. That was in the contract. An attaché case would be showed up at the set at the end of each day by some suit from the studio, and Brando went home with $250,000 in cash. I said, "Marlon, God bless you. Everybody would like to do it that way."
How many days did he work?
I think it was about $2.5 million worth.
In a not-too-distant suburb, on a very quiet street, Earl Keese, a reserved, hard-working homeowner, sits calmly waiting for his dinner. Little does he know, he's about to meet the Neighbors.
Neighbors is very funny. You and I watched it, and you said that you thought the two could have switched roles, Belushi and Aykroyd.
Well, that's
and that might have been more effective. Am I remembering that right? Or
well, I suggested before we shot it that they switch roles, and they did. And then Belushi got disenchanted of playing an old guy with white hair and so on after a couple of days. So the honeymoon was over.
Back.
No. The die had been cast.
Oh, I see.
I think it made more sense. And I thought John did a good job as the uptight guy.
Yeah. What was he like at that point in his life, Belushi?
It depends on which day you're talking about. It was like Belushi roulette. You never knew who you were going to get.
Yeah. Yeah. On the good days, was he...
He was very, very good. On the bad days, he was horrid.
Yeah.
And the guy
as a performer, or as just a personality to deal with, or what was the...
I remember this one fight that we had, and I said, "John, you got to be professional about this." And he said, "I don't want to be a professional."
But he was honest.
Right.
That was only about a year before he died, I think.
Oh, yeah, right, or less.
Yeah, was Aykroyd something of his caretaker?
Yes, very much so. Danny was the polar opposite. He was like the North Star. He was constant, always a gent. We rewrote the script, and we had a great time together, and he couldn't have been more fun.
Vic, come on, help me. I'll buy you a new truck.
Not like that one. And how about my triplane? How are you going to replace that, huh?
Help, please. I'm being sucked down.
Maybe it's best that way.
What are you talking about?
Well, you're not the ideal neighbor. You sacked my truck, you insulted my sauce, and you violated Ramona.
Come on, you said it was just a joke.
But she was in your bathtub.
Oh, no, she wasn't. She was in the bed.
And that is where you saw her mammal.
Her mammal?
Her hunkers, Earl.
But she dropped the towel.
Did she drop it, or did you psychically will it to fall?
Will it to fall?
Did you will her towel to fall?
No. Never. No.
Admit it, Earl. They'll go easier on you if you do.
Oh, boy. Temp music. I went on Neighbors. The temp music I had was from old 30s and 40s horror films. And it was perfect. And the test screenings, everybody loved it. And then I made a fatal mistake, and I didn't say, you know what, we don't need a score. We should just go with this. And I didn't do that. And if I had, I think it would have had a much better reception.
The other thing I remember when we watched it was that the score that got put on the film actually makes it, you have to kind of swim through it to get the humor of the film. It really does the movie a disservice.
And it didn't contribute to it. It was too on the nose, and it didn't give the audience any chance to participate.
I'm just thinking of your idea of using old horror music. Would be great.
It was the perfect counterbalance to the movie. It really worked.
Have you ever thought of going back just for your own satisfaction and splitting the tracks and doing another pass?
Good luck.
Yeah. Well, no, you make all those cool videos that you put on your YouTube channel.
But to go through the machinations of getting those tracks I could get back to the original M&E, I have, where that starts.
Yeah.
I'm being your goddamn slave is what I'm being, man. Now, we made a deal here.
So?
So you're supposed to teach and I'm supposed to learn, remember? For 4 days, I've been busting my ass. I haven't learned a goddamn thing.
You learned plenty.
I learned plenty. I learned how to sand your decks, maybe. I wax your car, paint your house, paint your fence. I learned plenty, right?
Not everything is as seems.
Oh, bullshit. I'm going home, man.
Daniel-san! Daniel-san!
What?
Come here. Show me sand the floor.
Rocky obviously led you to a kind of, to be perhaps even typecast as making a certain kind of movie that, if you want to be reductive about it, you could say it's the anti-hero overcoming situations, and it's sports centric. So Karate Kid obviously came about 10 years later. And Karate Kid is a movie with, similarly to Rocky, no stars. I don't know that it was a big budgeted movie.
Well, it was more than Rocky, but that's not saying anything. But it was about a surrogate father. Pat Morita and the Mr. Miyagi character was the surrogate father we all wished we had. He was wise and funny and generous, and what's not to like?
Yeah. Is that what attracted you to the...
You bet.
Yeah. Did you set that movie up yourself?
No.
The script came to you first, or...
No, Jerry Weintraub had this idea. He saw a TV show about a kid in the valley who was being beat up, and he took karate, and he stopped being bullied, and he thought that would make a movie, and he commissioned Robert Kamen to do the first draft, and then I entered the scene.
First wash all the car, then wax.
Wait, what do I have to wash all the car?
Remember, dear. No question.
Yeah, but...
Right. Wax on, right hand. Wax off, left hand. Wax on, wax off. Don't forget to breathe. Very important.
That's 1985?
83.
83, all right. So I was probably 18, 19 years old, and that movie had just come out, and I was standing in line at a multiplex going to see something else, and I heard two girls behind me, two 16-year-old girls, and they were trying to figure out what movie to see. And they were going through, should we see this? Should we see that? Should we see this? And finally said, no, let's just go see Karate Kid again. And I went, oh, okay, this is how hit movies get born. The hell with everything else. Let's just see the one that we know works.
That's great. I'd never heard that one. That's terrific.
Was that expected, though, for that movie?
Listen, they always ask you, what did you think when you were making... Who has time to think about that? You're trying to figure out how I'm going to get through the day. Am I going to get any sleep tonight? I never think about, how's it going to be received. You like the story, and... you think other people will too, and you wish for the best, but you don't spend time thinking about how it's going to be received. He said, I've never done it. Well, that's a waste of time.
So when you got his script, when you got Kamen's script, did you see it as a natural sort of progression from Rocky? Did you see why they were...
I didn't think about Rocky. I thought there's a totally different story.
Yeah.
People make that parallel, and you could make that case, but I never thought that they were similar, and they're very different characters.
The great thrilling scene, and I eventually did see Karate Kid, and I've seen it actually many times. I love the movie, and of course it's one of the most emotional scenes. Is he's put that kid through building fences and doing everything that the kid doesn't want to know how to do, and they put it together, and it's a scene that brings tears to my eyes when I see it. And a lot of it, of course, it's in his script.
Well, and Robert Kamen knew all about karate, and he was a black belt and so on and so forth. So he wrote all that stuff, and I knew nothing about boxing. I knew nothing about karate, and nothing's changed.
Right.
But he knew all that stuff. So the way he wrote it, we just followed the directions.
Yeah. Did he help you do any of that? Was he on set? Was he?
He and I became very good friends, and I had a lot of fun working with him. And we also did The Power of One together. So
right.
we hit it off. I had the greatest admiration and respect for writers, because you can't do anything without the script. If it's not in the script, you're talking to yourself.
Yeah, and now there were 3 sequels or 2 sequels to Karate Kid.
Well, there were about 18. No, I'm kidding.
There's 18 more in the future, I'm sure. Yeah.
There was 1, 2, and 3, and then there was the one with the girl.
Yeah.
And then there's the Will Smith one.
Right, of course, the reboot. Yeah.
Right.
I
did the first 3.
The first 3, yeah.
And I didn't like I had a whole different idea for getting the girl involved. I wanted it to open where Daniel is killed. He comes to Mr. Miyagi's defense and gets into a fight, and in the course of the fight, he's killed. Mr. Miyagi says, "I taught him too well," and is crushed.
Yeah.
And then the girl walks in, and you start from there.
Right.
And I was very disappointed with the third one. I didn't want to do that story. What Robert and I had this idea that the third one would spring from a story that Daniel hears in the second one, when he asked Mr. Miyagi, "Where did your karate come from?" And he said, "Well, my ancestor was a fisherman, and he's out fishing, and he too much sake, too much sun. He passes out, wakes up off the coast of China, and came back 10 years later with a Chinese wife and a kid, and the secret to Miyagi family karate." I said, "Now that's a story." Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. let these 2 guys time travel. They bump their head on something or whatever, and they're in ancient China. And they peer through the bushes, and there's the original Mr. Miyagi, played by Pat also. But we're in China now. And the Marty Cove Crease character is a pirate. And all these people come back, but they're in this. And we're in China. And nothing had been shot in China. And Coca-Cola owned Columbia at that time. And they would be happy to go to China. And there was nothing political about the movie, so China was happy to see us. And they said no. And so we did the first one over again. It was horrible.
It's funny, interesting to me, though. You did the 3 Karate Kids in a row, but it took you 3 sequels for you to get back to Rocky.
Well, I only do Rocky
and Rocky 5.
I only do Rocky when he's broke. Well, and Rocky was supposed to die in the end of Rocky 5. That's a big reason why I took the thing. He has this horrific fight with Tommy Gunn. He's on the way to the hospital. His head in Adrian's lap, and he dies. And the last scene in the movie, Adrian comes out and announces to the assembled world press in front of the hospital that Rocky is dead. But as long as people believe in themselves, Rocky's spirit will live forever. And I thought, whoa, what a way to go out. And we see him running up the stairs from the first one. Terrific. Let's do that. So I was very excited. I thought that would be a beautiful end to the series. And that's what Sylvester wrote. So we start shooting that in chronological order. And a week or 2 into the movie, the head of the studio calls up and he says, "By the way, Rocky doesn't die." "Really? Why is that?" "Well, these people don't die. Batman doesn't die. James Bond doesn't die. Superman, he doesn't die either." So Rocky didn't die, but the movie died, because without that, it was a Shaggy Dog story.
Yeah. Now you can't. I guess there's no logic, business logic to ending such an iconic franchise.
Well, people would have gone to see it.
Exactly. Yeah. Do you like giving actors, what I always think of as the actor's free take? Do it a few ways. Show me what you want to do. Give it a.
Well, hopefully I'm going to be able to be rehearsing with the actor long before we come to do it for real. So when we're doing it for real, which is the most expensive time, a lot of that stuff's been talked about and done, and the last thing you want to do is show up in the set and somebody comes up and says, "Where does the camera go?" Like, gee, let me think. I hadn't thought of that. All that stuff's got to be worked out beforehand. So when you're there for the real expensive time, everybody knows what they're doing. At least that's the ideal way of doing it. At least I think so.
So in your rehearsal process, does it begin with a table read and progress to actually staging things out?
No. Sooner I can get to the location where we're going to shoot the thing, and I don't need the circus. I don't need anybody there. The actor and my little camera. And
you don't even bring a DP?
Well, if he's on the payroll. But I know how I want the thing to look and so on and so forth. And you don't have the circus there. So you say, well, listen, where's the sun going to go down? Or why don't you start? No, okay, why don't you do this? And that's the time to play around with things where you don't have the intimidation of everybody looking at their watch and lunch is coming. And look how long they rehearse a play on Broadway. So why not rehearse a movie?
I've always felt, I've never done that extensive a rehearsal, but the thing that I've found very important is to bring the actors to all the sets so that they see the environment that they're going to be in. And what's usually happened is they get so excited they just start wanting to run a scene. They just want to start going.
The location is a huge character in the story. Mm-hmm. You end up looking at a lot more of the location than you do of the actor. So those locations are real important, and the more you can spend time living in there and moving around, and what would the character do if he had a window there he might look out at or whatever, the better.
Yeah. Also, you can avoid, and I mean this does happen, quite a bit when an actor walks in and says, "I'm sorry, what the hell is this? This is where I live."
I wouldn't have a room like this.
I wouldn't. Right. That's not happening on the day of. That's...
Blue wall? I wouldn't have a blue wall. Are you nuts?
Exactly.
No, you must have seen Day for Night, right?
Of course.
All right. Well, that's the classic movie about making movies.
Sure.
On Joe and Susan Sarandon's first movie, we had this horrible apartment on the Lower East Side, and we were going to start shooting because we shot in order, which I'm a big believer in. The last day of rehearsal, she wanted to sleep there that night, and we were going to shoot there the next day. She wanted to sleep there to get into the place.
Sure.
And this place, nobody would want to sleep there. So I had the greatest admiration for her.
Sure. Have you thought of working in television?
Yeah, but well, you got to keep in mind a few things. The last movie I did was the Jean-Claude Van Damme movie that I took my name off of, and because I got recut, and the thing went directly to video. When
you were Alan Smithy?
When there was you couldn't use that anymore because I think that was the name of a movie that Arthur Hiller did.
Yeah,
which
Joe
was
Esterhaus.
Pretty funny,
yeah.
Right? So I picked the name Patrick Maloney or something, the most stupid name I could think of. So much for trying to keep something like that a secret. It's a very small business. So anyway, that went straight to video. So if you're running a studio, you only get to greenlight so many movies, and if they don't make money, then you don't have a place to park there anymore. So, and I'm not getting younger every year, so I'm not on the tip of anybody's tongue.
Are you developing more things?
Well, I've got a Holocaust movie, which is a great story about a father and a grandfather and a son. And I've got another story with baseball as a background.
Okay, so wait a minute. Let's pause here for one sec, because here's the weirdest part of the interview, and in some ways it's so showbiz that you can't believe these things happen. So here I am talking with John, and I'm asking him about what his future projects are, and he's going to tell you about a baseball movie, a redemption-oriented baseball movie that he's looking forward to making. He didn't wind up making it. He walked off of it, as he had so many others. But what was peculiar here was that it was offered to another director, and that was me. I got offered this movie that John had quit. And I called John and I said, you know, a strange thing has happened, but that movie you told me about during our conversation is now being offered to me. And I know you left. I know that you didn't get fired or anything, that you didn't like something that was going on. But I said, I still feel like I'm marrying a friend of mine's ex-wife. Like, is this okay? Or can we all be friends with this? And John said, you know, let's have a coffee and I'll tell you my war stories. Good luck with it. You know, I'm glad they called you. Again, very John Avildsen. He just was not emotional about stuff like that. Unfortunately, we never had that coffee. A couple months later, he was dead. I think he already knew that he was sick, and it was kind of also like him to not tell anyone that he was ill, at least anyone who wasn't his close family. We made the movie. It is that baseball redemption movie. I don't know whether it's out or not when you listen to this podcast or not, but I've thought of John a lot while I was making that movie, and it was a little strange and a little sweet. He gifted me a movie, and that was the end of our relationship.
And I've got another story with baseball as a background that is about love and redemption.
Oh, that's Stano?
Right.
Yeah, I read that.
Yeah.
Yeah, good script.
And, you know, so I'm trying to get those off the ground and waiting to see if anybody salutes.
In Los Angeles on Friday, John G. Avildsen, the Oscar-winning director of the original Rocky with Sylvester Stallone, passed away after battling pancreatic cancer at the age of 81. Following the surprising success of Rocky, Avildsen went on to craft more audience-pleasing underdog stories, like 1984's The Karate Kid. At the time of his death, Avildsen was working on his first film in nearly 2 decades, Nate and Al, starring Richard Dreyfuss and Martin Landau. Among those paying tribute to Avildsen was Rocky star Sylvester Stallone, who posted a farewell on Instagram with a caption reading, "I'm sure you will soon be directing hits in heaven. Thank you, Sly."
How can you have more fun than directing a movie? You know, I mean, every day is make-believe. I mean, it's great fun. And especially if by the time the first day of shooting shows up, you know, you've got the crew you want, you got the cast you want, everybody's making the same movie.
Right.
Boy, it's really fun.
That's the end of part 2 of my conversation with the late John Avildsen. I hope you enjoyed it. I certainly enjoyed having it with him, and I loved knowing him. So hopefully you got to know John a little bit through that conversation. Please come back and listen to more of this podcast and more conversations. All interview material and audio clips are covered by the Fair Use Copyright Act of 1976, in which allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, education, and research. You can follow me on Twitter at ReelRDEF. That's ReelRDEF. By the way, I have been on Twitter for 7 or 8 years, and I am still solidly in the 3 figures of followers. And I'm fine with that. I'm goddamn proud of that. If you want to follow me, it would help, but, 500, 600, how many more friends do I really need in life? But please, give it a shot. You can also look at my blog, Movies Till Dawn. You can find it at moviestildawn.blogspot.com. Lots of videos, mostly of really strange old stock footage of movies, music, Hollywood, Broadway. It'll kill a little bit of your time during the day. You'll dig it. Thanks for listening to Movies Till Dawn. And in the words of my late and beloved mother, everyone should live and be well.